In the heart of Umiawobi village, nestled between lush hills and dense forests, lived a girl named Chidinma. From the time she was a child, Chidinma had a gift, one that set her apart from others. She could see things that no one else could see and hear whispers carried by the wind that no one else could hear. Her eyes held a depth that spoke of ancient wisdom, and her presence often caused discomfort among those who were unaware of her abilities. The villagers, superstitious as they were, believed that Chidinma had been touched by the gods. They whispered about her behind her back, calling her the girl with the spirit eyes. Chidinma's family, however, loved her dearly. Her mother, Nena, and her father, Obi, were simple farmers who believed that their daughter's gift was a blessing. They encouraged her to embrace it, even when others were afraid. Chidinma's siblings, a younger brother and sister, adored her, often running to her with tales of their day, which she would listen to with a smile, always offering advice that seemed far beyond her years. Life in Umiawobi was peaceful. Occasionally, she would help the villagers with small matters, finding lost items, guiding them away from danger, or interpreting dreams that left them uneasy. But for the most part, Chidinma led a quiet life, tending to her family's farm and playing with her siblings. One morning, Obi came home with a look of excitement on his face. He had just received word that a large house on the outskirts of the village had become available. The house, once owned by a wealthy family, had been empty for years. But now the landowners were looking to rent it out for a small sum. Obi saw this as an opportunity to give his family a better life. The house was larger than their current one, with more land to farm and closer to the market where they sold their produce. As Obi described the house to Nena, Chidinma listened intently. A strange feeling began to settle in the pit of her stomach, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. The idea of moving to a new house filled her with unease. There was something about the house that didn't feel right, but she didn't want to dampen her father's excitement, so she kept her concerns to herself. A week later, the family packed up their belongings and moved to the new house. It was indeed grand, with high ceilings, spacious rooms, and a wide veranda that overlooked the surrounding forests. But as soon as they arrived, Chidinma felt a chill in the air. The house, though beautiful, seemed cold and unwelcoming. The walls were thick and the windows were small, letting in little light. It was as if the house had been designed to keep out the warmth and light of the sun. Chidinma noticed something else as well. The walls were covered in cracks. Some were small, like the ones you might find in any old house, but others were deep and jagged, running from the ceiling to the floor like scars. It was as if the house itself had been through some terrible ordeal, and the cracks were the only remnants of its suffering. That night, as the family settled into their new home, Chidinma lay awake in bed, staring at the cracks on the wall. The strange feeling of unease had grown stronger, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the house. The first few days in the new house passed, but Chidinma couldn't ignore the unsettling atmosphere that hung over the place. During the day, everything seemed normal. The family went about their usual routines, tending to the farm, cooking, and preparing for market days. But at night, when the house was quiet, Chidinma began to hear things. It started as a faint whisper, just barely audible over the sounds of the night. At first, she thought it was the wind blowing through the trees, but soon she realized that the whispers were coming from inside the house, from the very walls themselves. She would lie in bed, listening to the soft, eerie voices that seemed to echo through the corridors. The voices were indistinct, just out of reach of comprehension, but they filled her with a deep sense of dread. One night, as she lay listening to the whispers, Chidinma noticed something strange. The cracks on the wall seemed to move. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, but as she watched, the cracks began to shift and change, forming shapes that looked like faces. The faces were twisted in anguish, their mouths open as if they were screaming, but no sound came out. Chidima was terrified, but she knew that she couldn't ignore what she was seeing. The faces seemed to be trying to tell her something, trying to communicate through the walls. She reached out to touch one of the cracks, but as soon as her fingers brushed against the wall, the faces disappeared, and the room was plunged into silence. The next morning, Chidima tried to tell her mother about what she had seen, but Nana brushed it off as a bad dream. "You've been working too hard, Chidima," she said gently. "This move has been stressful for all of us. You just need to rest." But Chidima knew that it was more than just a bad dream. Something was very wrong with the house, and she was determined to find out what it was. Determined to uncover the truth, Chidima decided to visit the village elders. The elders were the keepers of the village's history, and they knew the stories of every family and every house in Umiawobi. If anyone could tell her about the history of the house, it would be them. Chidima made her way to the elders' hut, a small thatched building at the center of the village. The elders were seated outside, enjoying the afternoon sun. When they saw Chidima approaching, they welcomed her with warm smiles. "Ah, Chidima, the gifted one," said Elder Obina, the oldest of the elders. "What brings you to us today?" Chidima hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain her concerns without sounding foolish, but she knew she had to try. "Elders, I've come to ask about the house my family has moved into. There is something strange about it. The walls are cracked, and at night I hear whispers. I've seen faces in the cracks, and I fear that something terrible happened there." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Elder Obina's smile faded, and he leaned forward, his expression serious. "The house you speak of once belonged to a family called the Nadis. They were a wealthy and respected family, but their lives ended in tragedy." Chidima listened intently as Elder Obina began to tell the story of the Nadi family. Nadi was a prosperous farmer, known for his vast lands and bountiful harvests. His wife, Adana, was a beautiful and kind woman, beloved by everyone in the village. Together, they had a young daughter, Ezanne, who was the light of their lives. But not everyone was happy for the Nadis. Nadi's older brother, Ojiugo, was consumed by jealousy. He had always coveted what Nadi had, his wealth, his land, and most of all, his wife. Ojiugo had once loved Adana and had hoped to marry her, but she had chosen Nadi instead, and the bitterness had festered in Ojiugo's heart ever since. One night, driven by envy and greed, Ojiugo visited a powerful sorcerer in a neighboring village. He paid the sorcerer to cast a deadly curse on Nadi and Adana, a curse that would strike them down and leave their wealth and land to Ojiugo. The curse took hold quickly, and within days, Nadi and Adana were dead. Their deaths were sudden and mysterious, and the village was thrown into mourning. When the village chief priest was consulted to determine the cause of death, he declared that they had died of natural causes. But unknown to the villagers, Ojiugo had bribed the chief priest to hide the truth. The elders paused, their faces grim. After Nadi and Adana's deaths, their daughter Ezinne disappeared. Some say she was taken by a relative, while others believe she was lost in the chaos. The house has been empty ever since, and many believe that the spirits of Nadi and Adana still linger, unable to find peace. Chadima's heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The faces in the cracks, the whispers in the night, it all made sense now. The spirits of Nadi and Adana were trapped in the house, unable to move on until justice was done. But how could she help them? Ojiugo was still a powerful man in the village, respected by many. And where was Ezinne, the missing daughter? Chidima knew that if she was to help the spirits, she would need to find Ezinne and expose Ojiugo for the murderer he was. That night, After her visit to the elders, Chidima lay awake in her bed, the weight of the elders' story pressing down on her. The cracks in the walls seemed to loom larger, and the whispers she had grown accustomed to became more insistent, more desperate. It was as if the spirits could sense that she now knew the truth, and they were pleading for her help. As the night deepened, the air in the room grew colder. The flickering flame of her oil lamp dimmed, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Chidima could feel a presence, a heavy, sorrowful energy that seemed to envelop the room. And then, slowly, the figures began to emerge from the cracks in the wall. First came Nadi, his form pale and translucent, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. Behind him appeared Adana, her beauty still evident despite the ghostly pallor of her skin. The two spirits stood silently before Chidima, their expressions a mixture of despair and hope. Chidima sat up in bed, her heart pounding in her chest. "Nadi, Adana," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know what happened to you. I know that Ojiugo cursed you, and that your spirits are trapped here. What can I do to help you?" Nadi stepped forward, his voice soft and filled with longing. "Chidinma, you have a gift. You can see us, hear us. You are the only one who can help us find peace. But to do that, you must bring our daughter, Ezinne, back to this house. She is the key to breaking the curse that binds us here." Adana spoke next, her voice filled with sorrow. "Ojiugo's greed took everything from us. Our lives, our happiness, even our child. Ezinne was taken away in the chaos after our deaths. We've searched for her, but in this form, we are powerless to leave this house. You must find her, Chidinma. Find her and bring her home." Chidinma's resolve hardened. She could feel the weight of the spirit's pain, and she knew she couldn't ignore their plea. "I will find Ezinne," she promised. "I will bring her back to you, and I will make sure Ojiugo is brought to justice." As she spoke, the spirits seemed to grow brighter, their forms more solid. They bowed their heads in gratitude, and with a final whispered "thank you," they faded back into the cracks in the wall. The next morning, Chidima wasted no time. She gathered her courage and approached her parents, telling them everything she had learned from the elders and the spirits. Nena and Obi listened in silence, their faces growing pale as Chidima recounted the tale of betrayal, murder, and restless spirits. Obi, usually a man of reason, was the first to speak. "Chidima, if what you say is true, then we must act carefully. Ojiugo is a powerful man, and if he suspects that we know the truth, he may try to silence us." Nena nodded, her voice trembling. "But we cannot turn our backs on these poor souls, Obi. They need our help. And Chidinma is the only one who can bring them peace." Chidinma's parents agreed to support her in any way they could. Together, they decided that Chidinma would travel to the neighboring village where the elders believed Ezinne had been taken. It was a journey that would take several days, and it was not without its dangers, but Chidinma knew that she had to go. Before she left, Chidinma visited the village shrine, where she prayed to the gods for guidance and protection. She poured libations and left offerings, asking for their blessing on her journey. As she left the shrine, she felt a sense of calm settle over her, as if the gods had heard her plea and would watch over her. The following morning, Chidinma set out on her journey. The path to the neighboring village was long and winding, taking her through dense forests and across rushing streams. As she walked, Chidinma couldn't help but feel as though she was being watched. The forest was quiet to quiet. The usual sounds of birds and insects were absent, replaced by an eerie stillness that set her on edge. Despite her unease, Chidinma pressed on, determined to find Ezinne and bring her back to her parents' house. She knew that time was of the essence. The spirits of Nadi and Adana were growing weaker, and if she didn't act quickly, they might never find peace. After 2 days of travel, Chidinma finally reached the neighboring village. It was a small, secluded community, hidden deep within the forest. The village was surrounded by tall trees, and the only way in was through a narrow, winding path that Chidinma had nearly missed. As she entered the village, she noticed that the people here were different from those in Umiawobi. They were quiet, reserved, and their eyes seemed to follow her every move with suspicion. Chidinma knew she would have to be careful in her search for Ezinne. The last thing she needed was to attract unwanted attention. Chidinma began by asking around discreetly, speaking to the women in the market and the children playing in the dusty streets. She described Ezinne as a girl who would now be in her late teens, with striking features and a gentle demeanor. But the villagers were reluctant to speak to her, and most simply shook their heads and turned away. Just as Chidinma was beginning to lose hope, she met an old woman who seemed more willing to talk. The woman's name was Amara, and she had lived in the village her entire life. She listened carefully as Chidinma described Ezinne, her wrinkled face thoughtful. "You're looking for the child of the natives," Amara said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I remember when they brought her here. She was just a baby, crying for her mother. They said she was an orphan, but I always suspected there was more to the story." Chidinma's heart leaped. "Do you know where she is now? Is she still in this village?" Amara nodded slowly. "She was raised by a family here, but they never told her the truth about where she came from. They feared that if she knew, it would bring trouble to our village. But Ezinne is a strong-willed girl. She has always felt that something was missing, that there was something more to her past." Amara pointed to a small house on the edge of the village, partially hidden by trees. "That's where she lives. But be careful, child. If Ojiugo finds out what you're doing, he will stop at nothing to protect his secret." Chidinma thanked Amara and made her way to the house. As she approached, she felt a sense of anticipation and anxiety. What would Ezinne be like? Would she believe Chidinma's story? And how would she react to the truth about her parents? Chidinma knocked on the door of the small house, her heart pounding in her chest. After a moment, the door opened, and a young woman stood before her. Ezinne was as beautiful as Chidinma had imagined, with a gentle face and eyes that seemed to hold a deep sadness. "Who are you?" Ezinne asked, her voice wary. "My name is Chidinma," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've come from Umiawobi. I need to speak with you about your past, about your real parents." Ezinne's eyes widened in surprise, and she stepped back, allowing Chidinma to enter. The house was simple but tidy, with a few pieces of handmade furniture and a small hearth where a fire burned. "Why would you know anything about my parents?" Ezinne asked, her voice filled with suspicion. "The family that raised me told me that my parents died when I was a baby." Chidinma took a deep breath and began to tell Ezinne everything. The curse, the murder, and the restless spirits of Nadi and Adana. She spoke of the cracks in the walls, the whispers in the night, and the plea of the spirits for justice. As Chidinma spoke, she watched Ezinne's expression change from disbelief to shock, and finally to grief. When Chidinma finished, Ezinne sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. "I always knew something wasn't right," she whispered. "I could feel it in my bones. But to hear that my uncle murdered my parents, that's too much to bear." Chidinma reached out and took Ezinne's hand. "I know this is a lot to take in, but you are the only one who can help your parents find peace. You have to come back to Umiawobi with me. You have to confront Ojiugo and expose his crimes. Only then will the spirits be free." Ezinne nodded, her resolve hardening. "I will come with you, Chidinma. I will do whatever it takes to bring justice to my parents." As Chidinma and Ezinne made their way back to Umiawobi, a dark shadow fell over Ojiugo. For years, he had lived comfortably in his ill-gotten wealth, believing that his secret was safe and that no one would ever uncover the truth. But deep down, he had always feared that one day, the spirits of his brother and sister-in-law would find a way to exact their revenge. Ojiugo was not only cunning but also skilled in dark arts, a knowledge he had acquired from the sorcerer who had cursed Nadi and Adana. In a hidden chamber within his compound, Ojiugo kept a magic mirror, a relic from the sorcerer that allowed him to see faraway places and sense the presence of those who threatened him. Late one night, feeling a growing unease, Ojiugo decided to consult the mirror. The air in the chamber was thick with the smell of burning herbs, and the only light came from a single candle flickering in front of the mirror. Ojiugo sat cross-legged before it, chanting the incantations that would activate its power. The mirror's surface shimmered and then cleared, revealing the faces of Chidinma and Ezinne. Ojiugo's heart froze as he realized that the girl he had once thought lost to the world was now returning alive and determined. He saw them traveling the path back to Umeowobi, and his blood ran cold when he recognized the necklace that Ezinne wore around her neck. It was Adana's necklace, a protective charm given to her by her mother, a powerful seer. Ojiugo had always suspected the necklace held some kind of power, and now, seeing it on Ezinne, he knew why he had been unable to find her all these years. The necklace had shielded her from his dark magic, and now it stood as a barrier between him and his plans. Furious, Ojiugo slammed his fist into the floor, the cold realization washing over him. He could not harm Ezinne as long as she wore the necklace, but his anger quickly turned to determination. If he couldn't kill her directly, he would find another way. He couldn't allow her to return to Umeowobi and expose his crimes. He began to plot, his mind racing with dark schemes. As Chidima and Ezinne drew closer to Umeowobi, Ojiugo set his plan into motion. He sent word to the sorcerer who had helped him all those years ago, requesting his assistance once again. The sorcerer, a man of great evil, agreed to meet Ojiugo in the dead of night. When they met in the shadows of the forest, Ojiugo explained his predicament. The sorcerer, intrigued by the challenge, offered Ojiugo a solution, a trap that would exploit Chidinma's powers and lure Ezinne into danger. The sorcerer provided Ojiugo with a cursed object, an ancient talisman that would weaken Chidinma's connection to the spirits and block their warnings. All you need to do, the sorcerer whispered, is get this talisman into their possession. The girl with the spirit eyes will become blind to the world beyond, and the spirits will be powerless to help them. Then, you can finish what you started. Ojiugo took the talisman with a wicked smile. He knew exactly how to use it. He sent one of his loyal servants to Umeowobi ahead of the girls, instructing him to place the talisman in the path they would take on their way to the house. Meanwhile, as Chidinma and Ezinne walked through the forest, Chidinma began to feel an unfamiliar heaviness in her mind. The connection she had always felt to the spirits was growing faint, as if something was blocking her gift. She tried to shake off the feeling, but with each step closer to Umeowobi, the sense of danger grew stronger. Suddenly, Ezinne stopped in her tracks, her eyes drawn to something glinting on the ground. It was a small, intricately carved object, a talisman. "What's this?" she asked, bending down to pick it up. But the moment Ezinne's fingers touched the talisman, Chidinma's heart lurched. "Don't touch it!" she cried out, but it was too late. The talisman had already begun to work its dark magic. As Ezinne held the talisman in her hand, the air around them grew thick with an oppressive force. Chidinma could feel her connection to the spirits fading rapidly, the whispers and guidance that had always been with her now slipping away like sand through her fingers. Ezinne, unaware of the danger, felt a sudden chill run down her spine. "Something's wrong," Chidinma whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to get rid of that talisman now." Ezinne, sensing Chidinma's fear, threw the talisman to the ground. But the damage had already been done. The dark magic had taken hold, and the spirits of Nadi and Adana, who had been guiding and protecting them, were now powerless to reach them. Suddenly, the forest around them grew darker, as if the trees themselves were closing in. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly into the shadows, and the way back had disappeared entirely. They were trapped. Chidinma knew they were in grave danger. Without her gift to guide them, they were vulnerable to Ojiugo's dark magic. But she also knew that Ezinne's necklace was still protecting them, even if the spirits couldn't reach them. They had to find a way to break the talisman's curse before it was too late. "We have to keep moving," Chidima urged, taking Ezinne's hand. "We can't let Ojiugo's magic stop us. As long as you wear that necklace, he can't harm us directly. We just need to get back to your parents' house. Their spirits will protect us once we're inside." The two girls pressed on, their steps quickening as they fought against the dark magic that sought to ensnare them. But the forest seemed to twist and turn around them, leading them in circles, the trees whispering in a language they couldn't understand, just when it seemed like all hope was lost. Ezinne's necklace began to glow softly, a warm, comforting light that pierced through the darkness. Chidima felt a flicker of her gift returning, and with it, the faint echo of the spirits' voices. "They're guiding us," Chidima realized. "We need to follow the light." Guided by the light of Ezinne's necklace, the girls finally broke free of the enchanted forest and found themselves at the edge of Umiawobi. But their relief was short-lived. As they approached Nadi and Adana's old house, they saw Ojiugo waiting for them, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You should have stayed lost in the forest," Ojiugo sneered, stepping forward. "You've come too far, and now you'll never leave this village alive." But as Ojiugo advanced, the spirits of Nadi and Adana emerged from the house, their forms more solid and powerful than before. The cracks in the walls seemed to glow with a brilliant light, and the air was filled with the sound of their voices, no longer whispers, but a roar of anger and sorrow. "Ojiugo," Nadi's voice boomed, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. "Your treachery ends here. You will pay for your crimes against us, against our daughter, and against the gods themselves." Ojiugo's bravado faltered, and he took a step back. "You think you can stop me, brother?" he spat, though his voice wavered. "I've taken everything from you, and I'll do it again. But before he could finish, the spirits surged forward, their power amplified by Ezinne's presence. Ojiugo raised his hands to cast a spell, but as he did, the light from Ezinne's necklace flared, blinding him. The protective charm, combined with the spirit's fury, created a barrier that Ojiugo's dark magic couldn't penetrate. Ojiugo screamed in frustration, realizing that he could not approach the house or harm Ezinne directly. The spirits were too strong, and the magic of the necklace too powerful. Desperate, he turned and fled, retreating into the forest. But Nadi and Adana would not let him escape so easily. As Ojiugo ran, the ground beneath him cracked and split open, a chasm of darkness forming in his path. He stumbled, the earth crumbling beneath his feet, and before he could react, he was swallowed by the darkness, pulled down into the abyss where the spirits would ensure he would never escape. With Ojiugo gone, the air around the house grew still, the oppressive darkness lifting like a heavy fog. The cracks in the walls began to heal, the once jagged scars smoothing out as if they had never been there. The light from Ezinne's necklace dimmed, and she and Chidinma could feel the presence of Nadi and Adana growing fainter, but more peaceful. The spirits of Nadi and Adana appeared before them one last time, their faces no longer twisted with anguish, but serene. "Thank you, my daughter," Adana whispered, reaching out to touch Ezinne's cheek. Adana's touch was warm and filled with the love of a mother who had been separated from her child for far too long. Ezinne felt a tear roll down her cheek as she gazed into the eyes of the mother she had never known, but whose love had protected her all her life. "We have waited so long for this moment," Nadi said, his voice calm and full of gratitude. "To see you again, Ezinne, and to know that justice has been done. Our souls can finally rest." Chidinma, who had been standing quietly beside Ezinne, felt a wave of relief wash over her. The tension, fear, and uncertainty that had filled their journey dissipated, replaced by a deep sense of peace. She knew that her role in this story was nearly complete. She had been the bridge between the living and the dead. And now, as the spirits prepared to move on, she felt honored to have been a part of their journey. "We will always watch over you," Adana promised, her voice like a soft melody. "You are the last of our line, and the future of our family rests with you. But you will not be alone. The gods and your ancestors will guide you." As the spirits of Nadi and Adana began to fade, the light around them softened, and the cracks in the walls of the house completely healed. The house that had once been a place of sorrow and torment was now a sanctuary, filled with the warmth and love of a family reunited. Ezinne whispered her final goodbye to her parents, her heart heavy with loss, but also with the comfort of knowing they would finally be at peace. The spirits vanished into the air, leaving behind a silence that was no longer ominous but serene. Chidima turned to Ezinne, who was still gazing at the spot where her parents had been. "You did it, Ezinne," she said softly. "You brought them peace." Ezinne nodded, her eyes still glistening with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Chidinma. You were the one who saw the truth when no one else could. You've given me back my family, even if it's just in spirit." Chidima smiled, though she felt a pang of sadness knowing that this chapter of her life was closing. "Your parents will always be with you, Ezinne, and you'll always have me. We're connected now, by everything we've been through." In the days that followed, life in Umiawobi slowly returned to normal. The village buzzed with the news of Ojiugo's disappearance. The villagers, unaware of the true nature of his demise, speculated that he had fled out of guilt or shame for something he had done. Some even whispered that the spirits of Nadi and Adana had taken their revenge. But the truth was known only to a few, the elders, Chidinma and Ezinne. Ezinne settled into her parents' house, now her home. With the wealth and land she inherited, she quickly became a respected figure in the village, known not just for her beauty, but for her strength and kindness. She honored her parents' memory by helping the less fortunate in the village, just as her parents had once done. Chidinma returned to her family's farm, her life seemingly unchanged on the surface, but inside, she knew she had grown in ways she couldn't have imagined. The events she had experienced had strengthened her gift and deepened her understanding of the world beyond the physical. The story of the Chidinma, the girl with the spirit eyes, became a reminder to all who heard it, that justice, though it may be delayed, can never be denied. We're thrilled to have you with us on our African Folktales journey. To stay connected, please subscribe to our channel for the latest stories. Give our videos a thumbs up to help us grow, and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to spread the magic by sharing our videos with others. And make sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for your support.